From age 16 to 30, I rarely chose between alcohol and weed. Most of the time, I used both simultaneously. The goal was always the same: get just high enough, just drunk enough. I was always juggling these two substances, trying to keep them perfectly balanced. The problem was that once the juggling routine started, I couldn't put the juggling pins down. Each hit and each sip made me want the other one, and the balancing act kept going until I inevitably dropped everything, often in spectacular, disastrous ways. And the mornings were brutal. Alcohol left me hungover and wrecked. Nothing fixed it faster than weed in the morning. But as soon as I was high, my brain wanted the other half, the drink, to complete the feeling. So I'd drink again, and the cycle just kept repeating. One thing before I go on: if you end up enjoying this video, this is a new channel, so I appreciate any likes, subscriptions, shares, and comments. Okay. At age 16, I smoked weed for the first time. About a month later, I drank alcohol for the first time, and almost immediately the two became completely intertwined for me. I remember the first time I heard the term crossfaded, meaning being high on weed and drunk at the same time. I thought it was a bit of a funny word, not because the word itself sounded strange to me, but because using alcohol and weed together was so normalized at that point that crossfaded sounded like a term some square who didn't drink or smoke or who was too afraid to do both together would use. For me, there almost always was no weed without alcohol and no alcohol without weed. The two just came as a package. I remember even my freshman college roommate being shocked at the concept when I told him that this was normal for me. He said something to the effect of, "If you're gonna drink, drink. If you're gonna smoke, smoke. But together, wow, that's for crazy people." Some people have tried both and have adverse reactions like nausea, anxiety, or disorientation that naturally steer them away from combining them, but that didn't happen for me, at least not at the doses I started at. My body and mind seemed to love the combination. This felt like a good thing at the time, but it turned out to be one of the worst things that could have happened. Here's how I used to think about the two substances separately. Alcohol was like my extrovert button. If I wanted to be social, funny, able to freestyle rap, or approach a girl at a party, I'd drink. It made me brave enough to engage with the world. Weed was my introvert button. After school, after work, watching YouTube, playing video games, that was weed time. It made me comfortable enough to forget all my anxieties about my insecurities with my body, with school, with work, with everything. And it also enhanced absolutely everything I did to escape said anxieties. Additionally, I was reliant on it for appetite and sleep, but I won't focus on those in this video. With this explanation, perhaps using alcohol and weed together seems completely counterintuitive. They almost compete with each other. One pushed me outward, the other pulled me inward. So why did I keep doing both at the same time? Because somewhere between the two, there was this third state. Alcohol made me brave enough to engage with society. Weed made me comfortable enough to disappear from it. Doing both simultaneously let me hover in between, present enough to function, numb enough not to feel. And that middle space was more addictive than either extreme on its own. It felt like I'd found a setting, like I'd discovered a frequency that just worked. Socially functional but not overwhelmed, relaxed but not totally checked out. It felt like a solution, but it only was a solution if I got it exactly right, and usually I didn't. Plus, I didn't always have infinite weed or infinite alcohol. I was underage, didn't always have money for them, and weed was illegal until 2016, so these were always complications, yet I always lived with the desire for more of both simultaneously. I didn't understand then that I was essentially trading a better future for a pleasant present. Every time I accessed confidence through alcohol, I was going further into debt on real confidence. Every time I used weed to feel okay doing nothing, I was going further into debt on real accomplishments and finding my life purpose. The state I thought I'd found wasn't a perfectly balanced frequency as I pictured it at the time. It was a loan I had no plan to repay. And in retrospect, it seems completely pointless and ridiculous. Here's what happens when you combine two substances heavily over time. They don't balance each other out, they remove limits. For me, each one masked the warning signs that tell you you've had enough. The anxiety that should have told me I'd had too much to drink got muffled by the weed. The paranoia that should have told me I was too high got numbed by the alcohol. The internal feedback system that's supposed to say stop just stopped working. My definition of too much kept moving. What felt like a lot at 17 felt normal at 19. What felt heavy at 19 was normalized by 21. The ceiling rose ever so gradually, and I never noticed how high I'd gotten. And this is the part that doesn't get talked about enough with dual use. You can't clearly see how bad the alcohol is while the weed is softening everything. You can't clearly see how dependent you are on the weed when the alcohol is keeping you in social situations that feel like evidence you're fine. They cover for each other. That's what made this harder to recognize than either one alone would have been. At some point, I had less tolerance for boredom, less tolerance for discomfort, less access to real motivation, genuine creativity, actual confidence. Not because those things were gone forever and I was unable to access them again, but because I'd been renting them for so long from these two substances that I had no idea how to generate them myself anymore without them. The financial cost of maintaining this homeostasis is something I really shudder to think about calculating, but honestly, the number isn't the point. The point is what I wasn't building while I was maintaining it, the version of myself I was slowly not becoming. And then there were the blackouts, waking up with gaps, having to piece together what happened from fragments in other people's accounts, hearing about things I said, things I did, plans I apparently made. Accountability was impossible because I genuinely wasn't fully there, but there's no way to prove that, and honestly, it probably wouldn't have mattered. It never mattered to the people I harmed. It wasn't like people said, "Oh, that's okay, you were drunk and high, it's no problem." There were also real physical stakes I was ignoring. Both substances depress your central nervous system. Together, they can slow your breathing and heart rate in ways that are genuinely dangerous, especially when you're lying down or falling asleep. I've had surgeries on my chest wall. I was born with pectus excavatum. My breathing capacity wasn't at 100% to begin with due to my years of surgeries, but I kept drinking and smoking anyway because the combo had numbed the part of me that cared about myself, my health, and my future. Alcohol was also horrible for my kidneys and liver, and I could physically feel pain inside those organs at the time. Same with my lungs from smoking weed so often. Here's the thing that took me a long time to understand. Because alcohol and weed functioned as one system for me, I couldn't dismantle them the way I could if they were two separate habits. I tried. Every time I quit drinking but kept smoking, the weed would eventually lower my guard enough that I'd think one drink is fine. Every time I tried to quit weed but kept drinking, the alcohol would hollow out my impulse control, and I'd be texting a weed delivery service or going to the dispensary. They used each other as back doors, which is why in December 2019, I quit both at the same time. Not because I had some perfect plan, but because I finally accepted that there was no version of quitting one that didn't lead straight back to the other. If you're trying to do the same and you're in a similar situation, here's what I'd actually tell you. And if you've gotten this far and you don't drink and smoke weed, perhaps some of this will be valuable if you have any other intertwined addictions. First, treat them as one addiction, not two. Don't negotiate with yourself about keeping one. The moment you hold on to either one, you're holding on to the system. Second, identify your specific trigger contexts. For me, alcohol was social situations and weed was solitude, which meant basically every moment of my life had an on ramp for using one or the other. Write yours down. Knowing them doesn't make the cravings disappear, but it turns an automatic reaction into something you can actually see coming and prepare for. Third, replace the function, not just the substance. You weren't just using these things to get high, you were using them to feel confident, to relax, to sleep, to tolerate boredom. Those needs don't just go away. Exercise, structured days, cold exposure, actual social accountability with recovery groups. These aren't cliches, they're functional solutions for what the substances were doing neurochemically. The more deliberately you fill those slots, the less your brain screams for the original solution. And fourth, expect the discomfort to feel worse before it feels better. The anxiety and restlessness you feel in early sobriety isn't a sign something is wrong, it's your nervous system recalibrating after years of chemical management. That phase is temporary. The version of yourself on the other side of it is not. I want to be clear about something. This wasn't two separate habits that happened to overlap. They blurred together into one system. Alcohol and weed together created something that neither one could have built alone, a feedback loop that was uniquely sealed against interruption. Quitting one exposed how bad the other actually was. Quitting both meant grieving an identity I had formed around using them together, not just breaking habits. And what came after quitting wasn't some immediate clarity and confidence. What came after was uncomfortable, boring sometimes. Anxiety and being anxious in ways I hadn't felt since I was a teenager because I was actually feeling things without a buffer for the first time in years. Normal consciousness felt wrong at first because my baseline had been chemically altered for so long. Again, I quit them both simultaneously in December 2019 and I haven't looked back. When you live inside a pattern long enough, it stops feeling like a pattern and starts feeling like the way things are. That's what the alcohol weed loop did for me. It blended into the background so completely that I couldn't see how much it was steering my decisions, my moods, my confidence, my identity. The strange part is that you don't notice how far you drifted until you step out of it. Being clean from alcohol and weed wasn't immediately a dramatic awakening for me. It was a slow, disorienting return of a baseline I forgot I ever had. After all, I'd never been consistently off the two of them as an adult, except for when I had surgeries overseas. But it was absolutely worth it to rediscover this baseline. Once the baseline came back, I finally understood how much the combo was shaping my life without my permission, and that clarity was eventually a stronger and more permanent high than either substance had ever given me. Thanks for watching, and if you made it this far, feel free to like, subscribe, share, and comment.